Late night at the office. The city lights cast a soft glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Papers are scattered across the desk, but neither of them is paying attention to work anymore. The air between them is charged, heavy with unsaid words. Elena, softly, hesitant, hugging her arms to herself. You should go home, Damien. It's late. Damien leans against his desk, his piercing gaze never leaving her. So should you. Elena forces a small smile, turning away. I don't have someone waiting for me. Damien exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair. Elena closes her eyes briefly, as if bracing herself, then turns back to him, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to say it.
I know.
Damien steps forward, his voice low, almost pained. Then why does it feel impossible to stop? Elena, heart pounding, her hands gripping the edge of the desk behind her. Because we never tried. Damien, his jaw tightens, his fingers itching to touch her, but holding back. I did. And I failed. Every damn time I look at you, I fail. Elena, her breath catches, the raw emotion in his voice pulling her under like a riptide. This isn't fair. To her.
To me.
Damien, his voice hoarse, filled with regret and desire. I know. But tell me to walk away, and I will. Elena swallows hard, staring at him, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on them. Morality, desire, consequences. Yet in this moment, nothing feels stronger than the pull between them. I can't. Silence. A decision neither of them can take back. Damien closes the distance between them, his hand reaching up to brush a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering a second too long. Tell me you haven't thought about this every night. Tell me I'm alone in this madness. Elena, her breath shaky, her body betraying her as she leans slightly into his touch. You're not. But that doesn't make it right. Damien, his voice deep, rough, with restraint. It doesn't make it wrong either. Elena, a bitter smile, her fingers gripping the fabric of her skirt to keep herself grounded. You have a wife, Damien. A life. Damien, his eyes darken, conflict warring within him, but his hand trails down her arm, setting fire to every nerve in its path. And yet, I've never felt more alive than when I'm with you. Elena, shuddering, the weight of his words pressing into her chest like an iron brand. Don't say that. Damien, his hand finally cups her face, his thumb grazing her lower lip, his control unraveling one frayed thread at a time. I tried to fight this. I tried to ignore it. But tell me, Elena, do you really want me to stop? Elena, her heart hammering, her resolve slipping as she looks up at him, her voice barely above a breath. I don't know anymore. Damien's lips crash against Elena's, urgent, desperate. The weight of restraint shatters as his hands grip her waist, pulling her flush against him. She melts into him, her fingers threading through his hair, grasping, needing. But even as the fire burns between them, the taste of guilt lingers on their lips. Elena, breathless, pulling away slightly, her forehead resting against his. We shouldn't. Damien, his breathing ragged, his hands still holding her as if she might disappear. I know. But I can't stop. Elena, eyes fluttering open, searching his, voice barely above a whisper. And what happens next? We pretend this never happened? Damien, his jaw tightens, his thumb brushing against her cheek, voice rough. I don't know how to pretend anymore. Elena, her heart pounds, reality clawing its way back in as she steps out of his embrace, wrapping her arms around herself. Your wife, Damien. She trusts you. Damien, a sharp exhale, running a hand down his face, frustration flickering in his eyes. Don't you think I know that? Don't you think I hate myself for this? Elena, her voice cracks, guilt warring with the undeniable pull between them. Then why are we standing here, teetering on the edge of something we can't undo? Damien, his fists clench at his sides, his voice raw, pained. Because the moment I met you, everything I thought I wanted, everything I built, started to feel like a lie. Elena, a shaky breath, stepping back further as tears sting her eyes. Don't say that. Don't put that on me. Damien, his eyes darken, taking a step toward her but stopping himself, his voice quieter, but no less intense. I'm not. I'm telling you the truth. And if you tell me right now that this, whatever this is, means nothing to you, I swear, I'll walk away. Silence. Elena stares at him, her lips parted, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The truth is right there, in the space between them, in the way her body aches to close the distance again. Elena, a whisper, her voice breaking under the weight of it all. I can't say that. Damien's eyes flicker with something dangerous, something irreversible. He reaches for her again, his fingers trailing down her arm, igniting every nerve in her body. Damien, his voice husky, full of promise and destruction all at once. Then don't. His lips find hers again, softer this time, as if sealing a fate neither of them is ready to face. But outside this moment, consequences wait like a storm on the horizon. Damien's hands remain on Elena's waist, his lips still ghosting over hers as if afraid to break the moment. But reality is already creeping in, whispering reminders of the consequences. Elena, pulling away, breathless, her hands pressing against his chest to create distance. This isn't real. It can't be. Damien, jaw tightening, his hands reluctantly dropping to his sides. It feels real enough. Elena, her voice shakes, her fingers trembling as she wipes at her lips, as if erasing the evidence could erase the act itself. Your wife. She's waiting for you. Damien, a flicker of pain crosses his face, but he doesn't deny it. I know. Elena, stepping back, arms wrapping around herself as if shielding against the growing ache in her chest. Then go home, Damien. Damien, a beat of silence, his throat bobbing as he swallows hard, his gaze burning into her like a brand. Is that what you really want? Elena, her breath catches, her resolve cracking under the weight of her emotions, but she forces herself to nod. It doesn't matter what I want. It never has. Damien, a bitter laugh, his hands raking through his hair, frustration lacing his words. Then why do I feel like I'm losing something I never even had? Elena, blinking rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you are. A sharp silence stretches between them, the truth cutting deeper than either of them anticipated. Damien watches her, as if memorizing every detail, before exhaling sharply and grabbing his suit jacket off the chair. Damien, his voice rough, controlled, but his eyes betray the storm within him. This isn't over. Elena. Elena, turning away, staring at the floor as if it holds all the answers she needs, but will never find. It has to be. He doesn't argue. He doesn't beg. He just stands there for a moment longer before turning and walking out the door, leaving behind the scent of his cologne and the ghost of his touch. The door clicks shut, and Elena lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. But deep down, she knows this is far from over. Scene: Damien's car, parked outside his house. The lights inside are still on. His wife is home, waiting. Guilt presses heavy on his chest, but so does something else. Something he isn't ready to name. His phone buzzes. A message. Elena, don't come near me again, Damien. Please. He stares at the screen, jaw clenched. His fingers tighten around the phone as he contemplates listening to her. But he already knows the truth. Some things are impossible to resist. He deletes the message. But he doesn't delete the feeling. Elena's apartment, 2 a.m. She sits on her couch, knees drawn to her chest, staring at her phone. The weight of her own message lingers in the air like a final nail in a coffin. But deep down, she knows this is far from over. Her fingers hover over his name in her contacts. She should block him. She should erase every trace of him from her life. But she doesn't. Instead, she turns her phone over and squeezes her eyes shut, trying to force him out of her mind. But sleep doesn't come. Scene: Damien's bedroom, 2:15 a.m. The bed is warm beside him, his wife's soft breathing the only sound in the dark room. His body is here, but his mind is miles away. On her. He turns onto his back, staring at the ceiling, guilt clawing at his insides. He had told himself he wouldn't cross the line. That whatever he felt for Elena was fleeting. Temporary. A foolish distraction. But the moment he kissed her, he knew. There was nothing temporary about this. His phone remains on the nightstand, her last message still unread. He doesn't reply. but he doesn't delete it either. Scene: office. Next morning. The air is thick with tension as Elena steps into the building. Her pulse hammers in her ears. She tells herself to act normal, to pretend nothing happened. But the second she sees him, she knows that's impossible. Damien is already there, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows in his office. His suit is impeccable, his posture relaxed, but his hands are clenched into fists, and his eyes darken the moment they land on her. She forces herself to walk past his office, willing her legs not to tremble. But as she reaches her desk, her phone vibrates. A single message. "Damien, we need to talk." Her breath catches. She should ignore it. She should keep walking. But before she can even process it, another message comes through. "Damien, don't run from me, Elena." Her fingers tighten around the phone. Her heart pounds in her chest. The battle between right and wrong rages on. But in the end, she already knows how this story will go. Because despite every warning, every reason to stay away, she texts him back. "Elena, conference room. 5 minutes. No one will see us." A pause. Then 3 little dots appear on the screen. "Damien, I'll be there." Scene: conference room, 5 minutes later. The door closes behind them. Silence hangs heavy in the air. Damien, his voice low, controlled, but his eyes burn with everything left unsaid. "You ignored my message last night." Elena, arms crossed, keeping a safe distance, even though there's no such thing as safety with him anymore because I meant it. Damien takes a slow step forward, his voice softer now, but no less dangerous. "No, you didn't." Elena, her throat tightens, but she lifts her chin defiantly. "I should have." Damien exhales, his frustration palpable, but he reins it in. "I told myself I wouldn't do this. That I'd leave you alone." Elena whispers, unable to look away from him. Even though she should. "Then why are you here?" Damien, a humorless chuckle, his jaw tightening as he shakes his head. "You already know the answer to that." A thick silence. The kind that says everything words cannot. Then, in a move so quick it steals her breath, Damien closes the distance between them. Damien, his hand grazing her arm, voice a rough whisper against her ear. "Tell me to leave. Tell me this isn't what you want." Elena, her breath shaky, her pulse hammering as her fingers curl into fists at her sides. Damien, his fingers tilt her chin up, forcing her to look at him, his voice dangerously soft. "Say it, and I swear I'll walk away." But she doesn't. She can't. Because her silence is its own confession. And in the space between heartbeats, his lips find hers again. Elena's mind screams at her to stop, to push him away, to run. But her body betrays her, responding to Damien's touch like a spark meeting gasoline. His lips move against hers with urgency, with frustration, with a hunger that has been caged for far too long. She grips his shirt, not to pull him closer, but to steady herself. His hands frame her face, tilting her head, deepening the kiss until her knees threaten to buckle. But then, a noise. A voice outside the door. They break apart, breathless. Elena stumbles back, pressing a hand to her lips. Damien's chest rises and falls rapidly, his eyes dark with something dangerous. Something possessive. Elena whispers, panic setting in. "We can't." Damien, voice hoarse, still watching her like he's memorizing every inch of her face. "We already did." The footsteps fade. Silence settles between them, but it's not comfortable. It's the kind of silence before a storm. Elena, shaking her head, voice laced with guilt and frustration. This was a mistake." Damien, his jaw tightens, his hands clenched at his sides as if holding himself back. "If that's what you need to tell yourself." Elena, snapping, her emotions spiraling. "What do you expect me to say, Damien? That I want this? That I want to be the other woman?" Damien, his expression hardens, but there's a flicker of pain in his eyes. "You're not just anything, Elena." Elena laughs bitterly, crossing her arms, trying to put a wall between them. "But I am, aren't I? That's exactly what this is. A secret. A mistake waiting to destroy everything." Damien exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair, frustration evident. He steps forward, and she steps back. He notices. Damien's softer now, voice laced with something raw. Then tell me you feel nothing. Tell me you don't think about me when I'm not around. That you don't dream about me the way I dream about you. Elena, heart pounding, voice barely a whisper. Damien. Damien, his eyes search hers, desperate for something she refuses to say. Tell me, Elena. Lie to me if you have to. Her lips part, but no words come. Because lying to him is impossible. Damien takes a step back, something unreadable flashing across his face. A mix of defeat and something far more dangerous. Damien, quietly, almost to himself, I won't stop wanting you. Elena, tears pricking her eyes, her resolve breaking apart like fragile glass. You have to. A long pause. Then Damien turns away, his shoulders tense as he reaches for the door. Before stepping out, he speaks, voice low and certain. Damien, I'll try. But they both know. Trying was never going to be enough. The next day, office tension at its peak. Elena avoids Damien like her life depends on it. She drowns herself in work, ignores the burning in her chest, and pretends everything is normal. But normal is a lie. Because every time she looks up, he's watching. Every time he passes by, the air shifts. And every time his voice reaches her ears, her body betrays her, craving something she has no right to want. Then an email notification. From Damien Calloway. Subject: My office.
Now.
Her pulse jumps. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. Ignore it.
Pretend you didn't see it.
But her body moves before her mind can stop it. Damien's office, doors closed, hearts racing. Elena, standing stiffly, arms crossed, voice clipped. What do you want? Damien, leaning against his desk, watching her like a predator cornering its prey. You didn't answer my calls. Elena scoffs, shaking her head. And you thought an email with a demand would work better? Damien, his lips twitch like he wants to smirk, but there's no amusement in his eyes. It did. Didn't it? Silence. She hates that he's right. Elena, swallowing hard, gripping the back of a chair as if it's the only thing keeping her steady. Damien, please. This has to stop. Damien, pushing off the desk, slowly closing the distance between them. You keep saying that. But you're still here. Elena, backing up instinctively, voice barely a whisper. Because I don't know how to walk away. Damien stops. Just for a moment. A flicker of vulnerability in his gaze. Then, in a heartbeat, he's in front of her, caging her between his body and the desk behind her. Damien, voice rough, dangerous, full of something dark and unrelenting. Then don't. Her breath catches. His scent, his presence, his everything is overwhelming. Elena, voice shaky, knowing she's already lost this battle before it even begins. This will ruin us. Damien, his fingers brushing against her cheek, his voice a whisper of sin and promises alike. Then let's burn together. And just like that, he kisses her again. Harder this time. Fiercer. As if claiming what was always his to take. The door is locked. The world outside fades away. And for just a moment, nothing else matters. The kiss is electric, a dangerous mix of passion and destruction. Elena should stop it. She should push him away, remind him of everything at stake. But the moment his hands grip her waist, pulling her flesh against him, her resolve shatters. His lips trail from her mouth to her jaw, down to the curve of her neck. Her breath is uneven, her fingers threading into his hair as he claims her like a man starved. Every touch, every stolen second, fuels the fire they should be extinguishing. Then, a sharp knock at the door. They freeze. Assistant's voice muffled. From the other side of the door, Mr. Calloway, your wife is here to see you. Elena's stomach drops. Panic surges through her as Damien tenses against her. His wife. Here. In the same building. They're secret inches from exposure. Elena whispers, breathless, eyes wide in horror. Damien, his grip on her tightens for just a second before he steps back, his face unreadable, his voice cold and controlled. Stay here. He smooths down his tie, adjusts his suit jacket, and strides to the door like nothing just happened. Like, he didn't just have his lips on another woman. He unlocks the door, and there she is. Charlotte Calloway. Elegant, poised, everything a perfect wife should be. Her sharp brown eyes scan Damien before flickering past him to Elena. Charlotte, tilting her head, her lips curving into a knowing smile. Oh, I hope I'm not interrupting something. Elena's heart hammers in her chest, but she keeps her expression blank, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. Damien, to his credit, doesn't even flinch. Damien smoothly, his voice as cold as ever. Of course not. What are you doing here? Charlotte, stepping inside, walking past him, her expensive perfume suffocating the air. I had lunch nearby. Thought I'd surprise you. Her gaze flicks back to Elena. Something sharp lurks in her eyes, something too observant. Charlotte's smiling, but there's steel beneath it. And you are? Elena, forcing her voice to remain steady, professional, like she isn't falling apart inside. Elena Carter, Mr. Calloway's executive assistant. Charlotte, a slow, calculated nod, her gaze assessing Elena like she's already decided something about her executive assistant.
I see.
The air crackles with tension. Damien's expression remains unreadable, but Elena feels the way his eyes linger on her. She feels Charlotte watching them both, her smile never faltering, but her presence suffocating. Charlotte, softly, almost like she's teasing, but there's a warning underneath it. You're quite pretty, Miss Carter. It's always good to have an assistant who keeps things interesting. Elena's stomach twists. The room feels too small, too dangerous. She's trapped between the man she can't have and the woman who already knows too much. Elena, offering a polite, professional smile, ignoring the way her palms are sweating. I do my job well, Mrs. Calloway. That's all. Charlotte laughs lightly, but her eyes flick to Damien, like she's daring him to say something. I'm sure you do. The tension is unbearable. Damien's gaze flickers between them before he exhales sharply. Damien, curtly, voice clipped Charlotte. Why don't we talk in my private lounge? Charlotte, amused, tilting her head slightly. Of course, darling. She turns, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she heads toward the adjoining room. But just before she steps inside, she looks back at Elena. Charlotte, softly, but with an edge that makes Elena's spine stiffen. It was lovely meeting you, Miss Carter. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other. And just like that, she disappears behind the door, leaving Elena feeling exposed, suffocated, and one step away from total ruin. Damien lingers for half a second before following his wife, but not before glancing back at Elena, just once. And in his eyes, she sees it. This isn't over. Elena's apartment. Elena paces the floor of her apartment, wine glass in hand, her nerves frayed. Charlotte knows. She doesn't have proof, but she suspects something. And if she starts digging, everything will come crashing down. Her phone buzzes. Damien, I need to see you. She stares at the message, her pulse spiking. She should ignore it. She should tell him no. But she doesn't. Elena, not tonight. Damien, I'm outside. Her heart stops. She rushes to the window, and there he is, leaning against his car, hands in his pockets, looking up at her apartment like he belongs here. Like he owns her. She curses under her breath but finds herself moving to the door, unlocking it before she can think. The second she opens it, Damien steps inside, closing the door behind him. Damien, low voice, rough, impatient. Did she scare you? Elena, swallowing hard, crossing her arms, trying to put distance between them. She suspects something. And she's smart, Damien. She's not just going to let this go. Damien, his jaw tightens, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer before she can protest, I don't care. Elena, soft, almost desperate, pushing against his chest, but not hard enough to make him stop. You should. Damien, his forehead pressing against hers, his breath warm against her lips, voice dark and possessive. You think I can stop? You think I can walk away from you? Elena, her heart racing, every inch of her betraying her mind's warnings. Damien, his voice a growl, his hands gripping her tighter, like he's afraid she'll slip away. I won't lose you. And then, before she can say another word, he kisses her again. This time, There's no hesitation, no second-guessing. Just fire, just desperation, just two people crashing together despite knowing they're bound to burn. The world outside doesn't exist. There's only this. But outside, beyond the locked door, in the dark of the night, someone is watching. Days pass. Tension coils tighter. Charlotte's presence lingers like a storm cloud, and Elena feels it, the slow unraveling of their secrecy. She and Damien try to pretend. They try to hold on to the illusion that they can control this. But deep down, they know the truth. It's only a matter of time. And then, the storm finally hits. Elena walks into the office, her heart pounding. Damien had called her here, his voice unreadable over the phone. But the moment she steps inside, she knows something is wrong. Charlotte is sitting on the couch, legs crossed, sipping coffee like she owns the place. And Damien looks like a man walking through fire. Charlotte smiling, but her voice is laced with ice. There she is. The ever-loyal assistant. Elena freezes. Every alarm in her body blares. Damien, his voice tight, controlled Charlotte. Charlotte, cutting him off, setting her cup down with a soft clink. Don't. We're past that, aren't we, darling? She turns her gaze to Elena, something vicious flashing in her eyes. Charlotte, softly, deadly, you should have been more careful, Miss Carter. Affairs leave trails. Even the smartest ones. Elena, forcing her voice steady, even as her stomach churns, I don't know what you're talking about. Charlotte laughs lightly, shaking her head. Oh, you really are adorable. But let's not pretend. I have the hotel receipts, the texts, the surveillance footage. You weren't exactly subtle. Elena's blood turns ice cold. Damien stiffens beside her, his jaw clenched. Damien, low, threatening. What do you want, Charlotte? Charlotte, smirking, tapping a manicured nail against her cup. That's the real question, isn't it? Do I want to ruin you both? Humiliate you? Drag your names through every tabloid until there's nothing left? A pause. Then she leans forward, her gaze locking onto Damien's. Charlotte, soft, lethal, or do I just want to watch you suffer? Silence stretches between them, thick and suffocating. Then, Charlotte, standing, brushing imaginary dust from her designer dress. Here's the deal, darling. You'll give me what I want. A clean divorce. A hefty settlement. And absolute silence. Damien, his fists clench, his voice sharp as a blade. And if I don't? Charlotte, smiling, but her eyes burn with victory. Then I destroy her. Not just her job, Damien. Her entire life. I'll make sure she never works again. That her name is dragged through the mud. That her reputation is ruined beyond repair. Damien's body goes rigid. Elena feels her breath hitch. And then, she does something she never expected. She steps forward. Elena, calm, firm, looking Charlotte dead in the eye. Do it. Charlotte blinks, caught off guard. Damien stiffens. Damien, sharp, warning Elena. Elena, voice steady, eyes never leaving Charlotte's. If ruining me is what makes you feel better, then go ahead. Expose me.
Take away my job.
Drag my name through the press. A beat of silence. Elena, soft, but unwavering. But you won't break me. Charlotte stares at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across her face. Then, she exhales a quiet laugh, shaking her head. Charlotte, murmuring, almost amused. No wonder he's obsessed with you. She turns to Damien, her expression unreadable. Charlotte, with finality, the divorce papers will be sent to your lawyer. Have your answer by tomorrow. Otherwise, she burns. With that, she turns on her heel and walks out, leaving nothing but silence in her wake. Night falls. Damien stands by the window of Elena's apartment, staring out at the city skyline. The weight of everything bears down on him. Elena watches him, knowing this is the end of the line. It has to be. Elena, softly, stepping beside him. You should let her win. Damien, turning to her, his eyes dark with emotion. I can't. Elena, gently, her hand touching his face, memorizing him one last time. You have to. Damien exhales sharply, his hands gripping her waist, pulling her against him, as if trying to fuse them together. But they both know this is goodbye. Elena, voice breaking slightly, we were never meant to last, Damien. We knew that from the start. Damien, whispering, his forehead pressing against hers, I don't care. Elena, a small, sad smile, but I do. She leans up, pressing a final, lingering kiss to his lips. It's slow, bittersweet, filled with everything they can't have. And then she steps back, and he lets her go. 6 months later, Elena walks through a new office building, her heels clicking against the polished floor. A fresh start, a new job, a life free of secrets. But some ghosts refuse to stay buried. She feels the weight of his gaze before she even turns. And when she finally does, there he is. Damien Calloway, standing at the end of the hallway, watching her like no time has passed at all. Damien, softly, a hint of a smirk, did you really think I'd let you go that easily? Elena's breath catches. And just like that, the fire reignites. Thanks for watching. For more stories, please subscribe Eververse Novel.